You just made a great decision because you decided to tune in to the Football v Football podcast. This is the top 10 wide receivers of all time. You want to stick around to the end because our picks are going to shock you, believe me. And I want to just make a note here. We just surpassed 30,000 views on YouTube, and I want to thank everyone for that. The majority of the viewers aren't subscribed yet, so I want to, ask everybody kindly, please go ahead and subscribe. Hit the subscribe button right now. I know it doesn't mean much to you, but it means a lot to us. So please go ahead and do that. And I want to introduce the gang, NFOY and the Rada. How you guys doing tonight?
Great, man.
I'm great, man.
Doing good, man. Ready to go.
You guys ready to get into
Try to
this?
sneak in some interesting picks today. We'll see how it goes.
Oh my gosh, yes, there was a lot of interesting picks that you guys sent me. So I'm going to set up how we're going to do this here. It's going to be a little differently. We're going to try to increase the efficiency here so that we talk about one player at a time and then everyone tells where they put them in their list. So these guys sent me their list beforehand, 10 through 1, and I put it into a collective list based on where they were ranked. So we're going to do it that way, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So, the number 10 guy on the top 10 wide receiver list is Andre Johnson. He was on my list and Ruddy's list. So I'm going to give Ruddy the floor here to give his explanation as to what inspired you to put Andre Johnson on the list and where you put him.
I got Andre Johnson at number 8 on my list. No, number 9, my bad, on my list. And you guys remember the physical specimen that this guy was, man? He was Calvin Johnson before Calvin Johnson. Huge wide receiver, runs, catches, bodies people. And he might have not had the longest career, but some people on this list just made it from just like being a beast type special individual, and Andre Johnson is one of those guys.
Absolutely. And listen, he was number 6 on my list. Okay, I'm gonna tell you why. This guy had exceptionally bad luck of playing. Sorry, there's like a static. Do you guys hear the static?
No.
There's
Yes.
some kind of static.
Yeah, I hear.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's coming from. Anyway, so I had number 6 on my list, and it's because of the quarterbacks this guy was playing with his whole career. Here's the list of the quarterbacks that he played with throughout his career: David Carr, Tony Banks, Dave Ragone, Ryan Mallett, rest in peace, Matt Schaub, Sage Rosenfels, T.J. Yates, Case Keenum, Ryan Fitzpatrick. They combined all of them for 2 Pro Bowls, all the QBs he's ever played with. This guy had 1,062 receptions, which is 11th all time, 14.1K receiving yards, again 11 all time, and he played for 14 years with bad quarterbacks, and he still had an amazing career. So I had him number 6 on my list just because of what he did with those quarterbacks. NFOY, do you guys have any comments on Andre Johnson here at number 10 on our collective list?
Wow, man, to be honest, he wasn't on my list, and he wasn't even top 15 on my list. And that's not a knock on him. Really, what that is, and I kind of mentioned this before. I feel like with wide receivers, we might have had to do a top 20 because if you think about it, like, you have 2 starters, maybe 3 starters on the team, right? So wide receiver is hard, but I have no problems with Andre Johnson's name being mentioned here. I think like what you're saying, I remember when he was drafted, and I agree with Rodney. Like, the guy was a physical specimen, like a freak. Maybe not quite Calvin Johnson, but kind of in that realm. And I think his career is kind of like 2-sided, where on one hand, I agree with you what he was able to do with the lack of talent around him was impressive, and that kind of makes him Hall of Fame worthy. That makes him, worthy of that kind of status. On the other side, I think what makes it difficult is that he doesn't have the resume that a lot of the other guys do, which isn't necessarily his fault, right? It's just like the circumstances that he was placed in. So that's also like one thing I considered on my list. But as a player, Andre Johnson was an absolute beast.
Yo, by the way, he had an okay resume. He has 7 Pro Bowls, and he led the league twice in yards.
Yeah.
It's okay. Maybe if you add that on top of what Omar said about how bad his QBs were.
11th all time in receptions, 11th all time in receiving yards, just outside the top 10 for both. Good stats, really good stats. NF, what?
Also,
go ahead.
He's also just nice to watch, man. Some guys you just want to watch him play.
Yeah, solid, very, very, very solid. Naif, what was your opinion on Andre?
I mean, I almost put him in the top 3 just for knocking out Cortland Finnegan, but honestly, no. He was one of the hardest guys to leave out of my list. I had him at number 12, I think, on the list I sent you, Omar. Yeah. He didn't play with any good quarterbacks until maybe the end of his career when he was already washed. But you said Derek Carr. If he played with Derek Carr, I definitely would have put him there. Because Derek Carr's horrible.
Yeah.
But I just think he didn't have that playoff resume. And he played in a pass-happy NFL. So that's kind of what I had working against him and cracking my top 10 list. But I had him at number 12. He did play with some horrible quarterbacks. He was really good. As Owais said, I mean, it's not his fault, but there were other wide receivers that played during that same time frame that also accomplished stuff in the playoffs. Yeah. So that's why I kind of left him out. But number 12 on my list, Andre Johnson.
Okay. Nice. All right, moving on to our next guy here. Our number 9 greatest receiver of all time is Tim Brown from the Raiders. He was on my list, OY's list, and Naif's list. I'm going to give the floor to OY here. Where did you have him on your list? What do you think about him?
Yeah, man, Mr. Raider. I remember when I was coming up, when I was little, there were so many debates because, in that era, there were so many great receivers. And, Tim Brown he kind of gets forgotten, I think, in that mix a little bit. But you got to understand, what he did. Over 1,000 receptions, almost 15,000 yards, and 100 touchdowns. And that's just receiving it. And then you throw on top of that, what he did. He was a great returner, right? He kind of did it all. I think, he gets lost in the shuffle because he played in an era of great receivers. Maybe the golden era of receivers, if we're being honest. But I think just as a receiver, he's one of the best I've ever seen. Just able to kind of do it all. And he has those individual numbers. Unfortunately, he didn't win as much, but I think he has those individual numbers that stack up against almost anybody.
But I would say the thing about receivers, and I put this. This was in play when I put my list together, is receivers even less so than, of course, quarterbacks, but running backs as well have a minimal impact on winning because they 100% rely on the quarterback to get them the ball. So the winning thing is it's tough. I think with receivers for them to have a really big impact.
Oh, and not to cut you off, but I have to say this: Tim Brown was also amazing in college. He was the first receiver in history to win the Heisman Trophy. I have to say that. I can't leave that out.
Good stat. That's true. That's a really good point. NF, where'd you have him? What'd you think?
I think I had him number 9 as well. Let me see. No, I had him number 10. But just consistency. I mean, so my list was really prioritized longevity over peak performance. I think if we did a list where I prioritized peak performance, it would look completely different. This guy played for 17 years. When he retired, he was tied for 6th all-time in receiving touchdowns, 5th all-time in receptions, and 4th all-time in receiving yards. So I think, as OY stated, his consistency, Mr. Radar. I mean, this guy played for 17 years. He was really good for like 14 of those 17 years. So
Yeah.
I had him in the top 10.
Yeah.
You guys remember when?
Boring, bro.
What?
He's boring, man.
No. Tim Brown was great.
There was
He's
no
so
Tim Brown.
boring. Tim Brown? I've never like.
It's because of the name. Huh?
I saw his stats.
The name matches his
He
style of
doesn't have
play.
the vibes.
I saw his stats and I'm like, wow, this guy's good. Like, he had really good numbers, but I just don't care. He's just like a bot. He's a bot. You ever heard from him? He's a bot. He's an NPC.
Yeah.
He's just a guy. He comes in, grabs the ball, go
Like Russell Wilson.
Receivers are supposed to have style, man. Receivers are like the fun part of the game.
But he's
Boring.
another guy. He's
For that
another
reason,
guy.
he's out of my
He's another guy where you got to look at his quarterbacks. Outside of Rich Gannon, I don't see much, to be honest.
Rich Gannon.
Yeah.
What did he have? I don't remember.
Exactly. I don't even remember.
Yeah,
Garbach,
Raiders historically
maybe.
didn't have great quarterbacks. That's true. But
Can you name one thing that Tim Brown did that you're like, wow, what a great thing that he did?
there's
No.
nothing.
Yeah,
He was a pretty great
Yeah.
returner, man.
he accused Bill Callahan of intentionally losing that Super Bowl.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, to John Gruden. Yeah,
Why?
Maybe he's back up in the
he said that Callahan intentionally threw the Super Bowl so that John Gruden would win, and they completely changed the game plan like one day before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's
Are
a
you saying the NFL's rigged?
huge accusation to say that.
Hey,
Wow.
not my words, his words.
Well, there you go, Rolly. There's a little controversy here from Tim Brown. A little spice on Tim Brown. Maybe you weren't giving him the respect he
That's true.
deserves.
That's true. Now that he's saying the NFL is rigged, he's getting back on my good side.
That's
you know
true.
me and conspiracies. I love them.
Well, listen, if Bill Callahan allowed John Gruden to win that Super Bowl, John Gruden must have given him a lot of money to do it because I really can't think of any other reason. So maybe he's still paying him till this day. But I had Tim Brown as number 8 on my list. Longevity, consistency, tremendous numbers in an era where it was more difficult to be a receiver than it is here in the modern era. And like you guys mentioned, played for 17 years, was 7th all-time in receptions and 7th in receiving yards. So really, I mean, his resume here is like really, really impeccable. So Tim Brown at number 9. Moving to number 8 here. I really like this one. We got Steve Smith at number 8, the great Panther. He was another guy that was just on my list and Roddy's list. So I'm going to cede the floor to Roddy here. Talk about where you had Steve Smith on your list and why.
Yo, Omar, man, me and you are on a similar
Wavelength, for sure.
wavelength, man.
Yeah,
For sure, dude.
yeah.
It seems like this time you're picking based on flash, and I respect that a lot.
Not really,
Numbers
actually.
don't matter.
Not really. You're going to see my reasoning. It's not because of Flash, actually. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But I'm curious about yours because he did have Flash.
I picked him. First of all, everybody on my list was purely for flash. All the stats are secondary.
Yeah.
If you're a wide receiver, your number one goal is to be flashy and entertain us. That's why you're gonna see a lot of grades that are not even on my list because they're boring. But if you have both, you're great. So Steve Smith, all-time Panthers receiving yards and touchdowns. I think he only led the NFL once in yards. But the way this guy plays, a small guy that's catching, he just jumps. I watch football to be entertained, and this guy is the epitome of entertainment. He jumps so high. He puts everything on the line, and he just has to me he's like the Barry Sanders of wide receivers. He's just like so fluid, man. I love guys that are fluid, you know.
Yeah.
And when I think wide receivers, Steve Smith just has to be there, and he's up there purely for just I just love the way that this guy plays.
Yeah.
That's why he's on my list.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think I have him. What do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have him at 6.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I had him at 7. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to start by reading his stats, but I'm going to tell you actually the reasons after that. So he had 1,031 receptions. That's 12th all time. Nothing to scoff at. And 14.7K receiving yards. That's 8th all time. Okay? Played for 16 years. And the most significant factor for him, his height. He's 5'9". Achieving what he did is absolutely exceptional when you look at every other guy that's on this list or even in our honorable mentions. Every other guy on this list is 6 foot and above, and most of them significantly so, 6'3", 6'4". So the advantage that those receivers had over defensive backs was critical to their success. Steve Smith didn't have any of those advantages. He had to out jump, he had to out juke, he had to outrun, be more sly than these other guys. So given all of that, what he was able to achieve, absolutely exceptional. Naif and OY, any thoughts on Steve Smith?
Yeah, I had him 19th on my list. Look, I'm not mad. I can understand you guys having him in the top 10. What he did was insane with some shoddy QB play. But again, he played in a pass-happy NFL. So I don't think he would have put up those stats if he played at a time
Why do you
like...
keep saying that? What does that even mean? Pass-happy NFL.
Like, the era in which he played in was different than the era in which Largent or Jerry Rice played in. Or Michael Irvin.
So what, you're going to discount? You are where you were. That's not his fault.
No, I wouldn't put Steve Smith over Michael Irvin. Steve Smith had more yards, but Michael Irvin played in an era where they threw the ball less, and he won 3 Super Bowls. So for me, that's the way I look at it. I had him 19th, as I said. But
Yeah,
I can understand how you guys put him in the top 10.
Okay.
I mean, great receiver. He probably doesn't even crack my 25, honestly.
Really?
I would be surprised. Yeah, bro. Do you know how many great receivers there are? Like, it's really hard.
Yeah.
I can understand.
But how about the stats? 12th all time in receptions and 8th all time in receiving.
Yeah,
yards.
but the way I look at it, I agree with Naif, where a guy who puts up, stats that aren't as great, but maybe like somewhat close in like the 80s and 90s is more impressive than putting up slightly more stats in this past heavy era. Is how I would look at it.
I would agree with that in general, and I think everything is going to be weighed. I agree with you that playing in the 80s and 90s as a wide receiver is more difficult than playing in this era. But also, there's he played for a long time as well, so he was also playing.
He's a great receiver.
Yeah.
And horrible quarterback. I mean, Jake Delhomme. Most of his career. I get it.
Is Curry the greatest 3-point shooter?
100%.
Okay, he grew up in an era where they were shooting a lot. Why are you giving them that and not giving the wide receivers?
Because this guy didn't break any records. He didn't win anything. Curry broke every shooting record and won like 4 titles. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think it's more the accolades.
Yeah. I mean, look, if Steve Smith had some of these accolades...
He's a wide receiver, man.
He'd definitely be in my top 10. He'd definitely be in my top 10.
22 guys on a football team.
Honestly, this was harder than the running back or the quarterback list. I think
For sure.
Maybe we have the same top 3, but outside of that, I'm sure...
Well, I don't know that we have the same top 3, actually.
What?
We definitely don't.
So we will get to that.
Lovey's got Adam Thielen number 1.
We will get to that. We will get to that. But we're going to move now to the number 7 guy, which is a guy that played for my favorite team, Steve Largent, at number 7 here. And despite the fact that I like the Seahawks, I wasn't watching them back then, this guy was on OY and Naif's list. He was not on my list or Ruddy's list. So I'm going to cede now to Naif. Why don't you head and get started? Tell us about where you had Steve Largent and why.
Yeah, I had him at number 8. I mean, look, I went back and watched. There were a couple of white defensive backs, but towards the end of his career, there were 0 white defensive backs. So that's why he stayed on my list. But I think I sent you another list where I bumped him back a bit.
Yeah.
At the time in which he retired, he was number 1 in pretty much every wide receiver category. So, I mean, what else do you want this guy to do? honestly, that's why he made my list. I know we were trying to keep it more so 80s and above, but
Not
this guy did
necessarily.
play into the 80s.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily what 80s and above.
Not necessarily
Yeah.
keep it at 80s because really, like wide receiver, I think because most of them are going to be in the current era. Actually, if you look back, like we had Jim Brown and all these Walter, there was no great running back, receivers at that time. That wasn't where the game was.
I mean, OY's top three would be Don Hudson and Lynn Swan. I thought we were keeping the 80s and above.
What?
That guy goes way back.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sure you did. But no, I thought we were keeping it 80s and above. But yeah, this guy played into the 80s. When he retired, he was number one in almost every wide receiver category. So there isn't much more that he could have done. Do I think he's better than some of these other guys you mentioned? Maybe. I don't know. He looked great. He didn't have great quarterbacks either.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So that's why I have.
So I have him at number 4, which is probably closer to like where you originally had him. I agree with what you're saying about how he played, and if you look at his numbers, right, 800 catches, 13,000 yards, and he hit like that magical number of 100 touchdowns. To do that in that era is impressive. And again, it's not like he played with like a juggernaut or a great quarterback. I think there could be an argument that until a certain two guys came along in the mid to late 90s, that Steve Largent might have been the second greatest wide receiver of all time. Until those two guys, I think that there are guys who are bigger and stronger and faster for sure. But in terms of like playing the position, I think there are very few guys. Well, on my list, only like 3 guys were better than him at actually like being a receiver. So yeah, he absolutely deserves to be up here, and I agree with what Naya was saying, like how he plays the game.
Yeah. Well, when you guys put him on your list, this was a guy that I had always heard about him talking to Seahawks fans, but he played in the 70s and 80s before I watched football and isn't a big overall figure in NFL history. He seems like, regional fans and diehard fans know him, but not everyone else knows him. That's what, Ruddy was saying as well. Like, who is this guy? He was 32nd all time in receptions. And like you guys mentioned, he actually broke the record during his time in the 70s and 80s before Jerry Rice. He was the record holder for the 70s and 80s. So there was a time in the league when Steve Largent was the greatest receiver in the league or of all time in his time. 19th all time in receiving yards. Played for 14 years. I also got to mention his, the physical features. He was, again, sub 6 foot guy. I think he was 5'11", and he's the only white guy on here. So, it's.
Oh, he was white?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
You're just discovering more. Yeah. No, this guy's a very, very unique guy. Very, very unique guy.
That changes things.
Of course, because I was gonna say you guys are crazy. You're putting a guy like this guy is like from this like who you never watched this guy play. What are you talking to? You just saw some numbers on a paper. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
No, we watched some highlights.
Like I can't put a guy that I didn't watch play. He needs to pass the eye test.
I get that.
However, he's a white guy playing in the 70s as a wide receiver. That changes everything.
Yeah.
And 80s.
Yeah.
The NFL is like reverse baseball, If
Yeah.
white guys were playing back then, they must have been good.
Right.
Honestly, if he retired and there were still white cornerbacks in the league, I would have probably bumped him out of the top 10. But towards the end of his career, you watch his highlights, 0 white cornerbacks.
Right.
0.
Yeah, he played.
and
he
he was
played
still-
well
he
into
still
the
did
80s. Yeah.
He was beating
Yeah.
black dudes.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
the limit.
Yeah, that's
We're keeping it real on the Football v Football podcast. This is what you're tuning in for.
We're all brown guys, man. It's all good.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to the number 6 guy here. We got Mr. Steady, Marvin Harrison, the lifetime Colt. He was on my list, OY's list, and NF's list. I think I kind of know why he wasn't on the Rada's list. We'll start with OY here. What do you think about Harrison? Where'd you have him on your list?
exactly at number 6. I think I might have had him a little higher, and then I kind of bumped him down a little bit. But that connection between him and Peyton might have been the best wide receiver quarterback connection since Montana Rice, or maybe even Young Rice. I don't know, but definitely Montana Rice. So 1,100 receptions, almost 14,500 yards, and 128 touchdowns, which is nuts, right? 128 touchdowns. I was surprised, the guy who I watched his whole career, and for some reason I never associated him with being a guy who catches, that many touchdowns. So I was a little surprised to see that. But yeah, this guy is, if you want route running, separation, being consistent, being where you're supposed to be. I'm sure Peyton had a lot to do with that. But as a pure wide receiver, I think he's one of the best pure he's not strong and fast and physical, but in terms of route running and being absolute wide, a pure wide receiver, Marvin Harrison one of the best that I've ever seen.
Yeah. NF, where'd you have him? What do you think?
Yeah, I had him at number 7. I had him at number 4 earlier. I think it was number 4 and number 5, and I bumped him back.
Yep.
I'll let you guys ramble off his overall stats, but there are a couple of things that worked against him. That's why I pushed him back. His playoff performance was not great at all. He had 16 career playoff games, only 800 yards. And then again, as OY said, he played with Peyton Manning. He's arguably one of the best, if not the greatest quarterback of all time. And then there's the whole Reggie Wayne factor. He played with Reggie Wayne for the latter half of his career, and Wayne had a similar career arc. So that's why I pushed him back a bit, but I had him at number 7 overall. And he killed somebody.
Are you serious?
For it. Yeah. I was waiting for it.
Killed?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. He's a murderer?
Yeah. No, he hired somebody to kill somebody.
That guy? That innocent-looking guy that just loved candy?
Oh, yeah.
No, man. He was not convicted of anything, bro. This guy's trolling.
Okay. Look it up.
Wow. I didn't realize
I'm looking
that.
at it right now.
No, he wasn't charged. He wasn't charged.
Where
there's smoke, there's...
No, he was charged, but he was not... He was charged for
just
gun.
Look up the case. Look up the case, dude. It's clear cut.
Yes, a Philadelphia car wash, but no charges were filed.
Yeah.
And then he had legal issues with firearms, but he was not convicted.
Firearms?
He was innocent.
Yeah.
This guy had a whole life off the field I had no idea about.
Look up the case, Omar. Look up the case. It's pretty shady.
Holy crap. Well, listen, I'm going to zoom in here and just focus. Huh?
Kind of tells you something about the guy.
Well, listen, brother. After this, you might have to reconsider your list. This guy's got more. This guy's got more spice than you thought.
No. Because even when he got in trouble, he was still boring and quiet. To me, if you are quiet and boring, you don't deserve to be on this list. I don't care how good you are. I don't even think he was that good. Have you ever seen a Marvin Harrison crazy catch? No. This guy's whole career was built by Peyton Manning. He did everything for this guy.
But even off the field, he caught a body.
The ball came to him. That's all he did.
Yeah.
Ran straight, made a move, did this, the ball's there.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
but once he did that and caught touchdowns.
Any crazy one-handed, none of that.
But when you consider, after he caught those touchdowns and ran those boring routes, that he went out, hired somebody to kill people and had assault rifles, and that adds a little more excitement, I would say, to the overall picture of Marvin Harrison.
Keep it on the field, man.
Yeah. Well, I guess he could have shot people on the field too. But he killed a lot of these DBs with his speed. But I'm just going to stick with the stats here. This guy had 1.1K receptions, 5th all-time, 14.5K receiving yards, 9th all-time, played for 13 years. Actually, that's on the lower end of some of these receivers. I thought he was just born to quietly and efficiently play receiver. These numbers in 13 years, extremely impressive. Of course, you guys acknowledged this before. He played with Peyton Manning. I got to acknowledge that. But you got to remember also, Manning wasn't amazing early in his career. He had actually a really, really bad rookie season. And you have to say like Marvin is part of what made Peyton Manning what he is. You know, like without him early on, I think
I don't know, man.
there's something to be said about that.
Oh, that's blasphemy.
I don't know, man.
You don't think
Peyton
so?
was pretty great in college. Peyton was pretty great in college.
His rookie year though, he had a terrible rookie year.
Yeah, but you know what? Like that happens. Like like quarterback's first 2, maybe even 3 years. Like we saw it with Trevor Lawrence. Like he didn't look that great early on.
He didn't look that great, but Peyton Manning was all time bad his rookie year. It was. I think doesn't he have like one of the most interceptions for a rookie or something? Yeah. So it's. But anyway, I just listen. I had him pretty high. I think I had him at 5 on my list. So like, I'm just saying. Anyway, moving on to our overall number 5 guy, we got Calvin Johnson, Megatron. He was the first guy that was on all of our lists here. And so we'll go ahead and start with the Rada with a shocked face there. Why don't you give us a little bit of where Calvin Johnson was on your list, and what do you have to say about him?
Whoa.
Calvin Johnson is number 2.
Whoa.
Calvin Johnson is the second best wide receiver ever. I don't even care about this guy's numbers, and you guys know it deep down in your hearts. You all know he's the greatest. You all know I don't care about any numbers. We all know Megatron is the greatest. This guy is like Jordan, bro. It's unbelievable. I don't need any numbers, and I don't even need to explain myself because he was so goddamn good. You put 3 guys on Calvin Johnson, and he catches the ball. 3 guys. Multiple times has happened. Name one other receiver that people have done that to. None.
Yeah, but one of those guys was Jeff Heath.
Huh?
One of those guys was Jeff Heath. And another one of those guys was Brandon Carr. So.
Oh, you're talking about terrible Cowboys defensive
Brandon
backs.
Carr had a good 7-game, time span in the NFL. I'm telling you.
Yeah, no,
I'm not one of them.
I mean, listen, I think he was great too.
No,
I'll let.
Not one of them, but come on, guys. What's the number? Ahmad? 5?
Yeah, he's fifth. But he's the first guy so far that's been on all of our lists, so that's something.
You guys are not using your eyes. You guys are reading some kind of book.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're like, oh well, his numbers were low.
No.
Are you guys serious, man?
That's not why he's not top 5.
He retired early. You have Barry
that's
Sanders.
the problem. That's the problem.
You guys had Barry Sanders 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
But you have Calvin Johnson.
That's the problem.
There are differences, though. There are differences. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let NF talk here, but I'm going to tell you what the differences are.
I had him at number 9. I agree with Roddy. Eye test wise, this guy's got to be top 4, maybe top 3. I had him at number 9 because he retired way too early. He retired at 29. He did play with a good quarterback. He actually played with a quarterback that won a Super Bowl after he left. So, I mean, that was working against him. He retired at 29 years of age. He quit, and that's why I have him at number 9. But outside of that, yeah, he's one of the greatest wide receivers that I've ever seen with my 2 eyes. Yes, yeah. I agree.
Oh, why? Where'd you have him? What do you think of him?
So I have him kind of in between. I had him at 7. I had him a little higher initially, then I kind of bumped him down for some of the reasons that Nia said. So okay. I think Calvin Johnson is the greatest, like, Madden player of all time. Other than, like, maybe Barry Sanders and, like, Marshall Falk, but at least the greatest Madden, like, wide receiver. Like, 6'5", 240 pounds, runs like a 4.3, maybe even 4.2, actually, I think. The guy was, like, a freak. The greatest physical specimen I've ever seen as a receiver. And I think that's one of the main reasons that he's in the top 10. And he could play, right? It's not like he was just, like, big and strong. Like, no, like, he could play. I think what knocks him a little bit, again, is the longevity and the lack. See, when I say resume, I agree with you guys that wide receivers don't necessarily always make the difference between championship runs, but when you have guys that did contribute to that, it's hard to put him over that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I get it, his team was horrible all those years, but, like, we have guys who won multiple Super Bowls on his list, multiple championships, so it's kind of hard to put him over that. But in terms of, like, an individual specimen, I don't think there was ever anybody better than him.
Yeah, it's a big shame, honestly. And let me tell you, I put him on here. I have him at number 10. Okay, I have him at number 10, and I have to acknowledge he was on pace to become the best wide receiver of all time. If he doesn't retire early after playing 9 years, less than 10 years, he is on pace to become the greatest wide receiver of all time. Of all time. Okay? So to me, it's very upsetting that Detroit happened to draft him the same way they did to Barry Sanders because they trapped him. They trapped him on a terrible team. And, I know you mentioned, Nav, about Matt Stafford, but, it's a matter of once they escape Detroit. I mean, really, it's the franchise. It's not the city of Detroit or whatever. Like, once you go to another, if he would have managed to go to another team somehow, and he could have, a lot of people do that. Carson Palmer retired just to get out of Cincinnati to go to another team. There are avenues to do that if you wanted to, but he wanted out after 9 years. And that's partially on him. It is some on Detroit, but it's partially on him as well. Like we mentioned, he was the best in the league at one point. He was absolutely dominant. But his stats they aren't there. They're not in those top 10 realm. I mean, 32nd all time in receiving yards and 50th all time in receptions. He only has 731 receptions. When you compare it to a lot of these other guys, it's just not there.
It's that longevity thing. Like I said, I mean, if we're doing peak performance, this list looks completely different. He'd probably be top 3.
Yeah.
For that one game alone.
Yeah, right.
Dude, amazing. And I was actually watching some highlights the other day that game where he didn't complete the catch all the way to the ground, which set the precedent for a lot of heartache for Cowboys fans with Des Bryant. Years after that was. I don't know where the NFL's head was at with that rule.
We'd still run the ball from the 1 yard line. Super Bowl. If we needed 6 points.
Shut up, Nav. I hate you.
Yeah. God.
All right. We're moving to the number 4 guy here, and you guys are going to want to listen. You guys are going to want to listen to this one. Number 4 guy on our collective list is Jerry Rice. Number 4 all-time wide receiver.
Well, you got him at 15, don't you?
I'm going to cede to the one guy that didn't have him on the list. Go ahead.
One guy didn't have him on the list?
One guy didn't have him on the list. I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah. Okay.
What?
Should I just tell you who my number 1 is?
What? You didn't have Jerry Rice on your list?
Guys, my number 1.
No.
No, don't tell it.
No, don't ruin it.
No, but it's part of it. He can say it because it's part of this thing.
Guys, my number 1 greatest wide receiver of all time is Dennis Houston.
Guys, I'm going home. Okay, I'll see you guys later.
Going home to Yemen.
This is a joke, man. It's just a joke. Like, because I've been running with this Dennis Houston, Jerry Rice thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just a
So
joke.
Dennis Houston is Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
On your list. Okay.
I'm so confused. What's going on?
But you just affected the overall rating.
I mean, I listen. I got the lists, and I put them into the mathematical equations of how this was going to be. So that's how we got to this. So.
Guys, we all know Rice is number 1. It doesn't matter. Like, we all know Rice is number 1.
Do we?
All right.
Can I give you a stat, Holly?
Yeah.
If you take away 5,000 receiving yards and 40 touchdowns from Jerry Rice's overall total, just take away 5,000 receiving yards and 40 touchdowns, he'd still be number 1 in receiving yards and touchdown catches.
Yeah, maybe if I played till I was 48, I'd have the same numbers too.
Joe Montana and Steve Young are in the Hall of Fame. You know what the common denominator is there? Jerry frickin' Rice.
Okay. They're also great too. They gave him the ball a lot.
So now, if you had him number 1 on your list, so Roddy, where did you have him on your list?
I think I had him at a reasonable number 3.
Okay. Okay. So you're close to this. What happened on the list?
And I'll explain to you why. Okay.
Yeah, please.
This guy, if you look at his numbers, I think there's no doubt that he's so far ahead of everybody else. But I don't think in terms of numbers. Only.
Yeah.
I think I have a holistic view on wide receivers.
Yeah.
Jerry Rice, in terms of the eye test, is average. I'm sorry. He's so basic.
Okay, but what about the fact that his last name is part of a dominant food group? What about that?
That's the dumbest thing
Does
I've
that not
heard.
play a role?
Guys, he's great, okay? And people say, oh, he's number one. Like, they just throw it out there like he's number one. Oh, look, he has the most numbers, Super Bowls, 10-time All-Pro. He has everything, right? But I'm sorry, Calvin Johnson's better than him. If you tell me who do I want, I'm taking Calvin Johnson every time. I don't care how good his numbers are.
Yeah.
He's just better. Yes, but if I'm on a team and I have to pick, right? We're picking players. I'm picking Calvin Johnson, and if you pick Jerry Rice, you're gonna lose.
Listen, I told you Calvin Johnson was on pace to become the greatest wide receiver of all time. But we are putting together the body of work. The body of work. You have to put together a lot of factors. There's a lot of factors, okay? Some factors are more important to some people than to other people. He was on pace. But you know what? He ended up being a quitter. He was a quitter. Didn't reach 10 years. Couldn't hack it. Couldn't hack it in the NFL for 10 years. That's the problem.
Sometimes you get lucky. You get a great job with great coworkers. Sometimes you have a great boss. Sometimes you have a shitty boss. That's what Jerry Rice, he had great bosses.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And listen,
I put him number 3. I didn't disrespect the guy.
That's true.
I didn't take him off the list like, oh, why is it?
Yeah. Well, listen.
List, man. This is the second coming.
Listen, viewers, we promised you shock, and we're delivering shock with Jerry Rice at number 4 all time. I'm going to talk about what he was on my list. He was number 1, obviously. 1.5K receptions, first all time. 22.8K receiving yards, that's first all time. Like Naif said, you could take off 5K yards, and he would still be the best receiver of all time. Played for 20 years. Incredible the number of yards he had in years. Playing in an era before passing was, made easy by the league, essentially. Was the best receiver in the league for years, and has 3 Super Bowls for those that look at the championships as something that's relevant here. So Jerry Rice is number 4. Number 3, our number 3 guy, T.O. Terrell Owens, a.k.a. Team Obliterator, as OY called him. He is another guy that was on all of our lists. OY, we can start with you here again. Where'd you have him on yours? What do you think of him?
Yeah, man. T.O., as you guys know, and I'm sure I speak for Naif, I hate the guy. Horrible.
What? No, I love him.
I guess I'll speak for myself then. So, yeah, I can't stand the guy. But at the end of the day, he is the 3rd best receiver I've ever seen in my life. And what I respect about him is that he built himself into that. I'll let you get into the stats and whatever, but this guy had so much heart, and he had so much, just mental toughness. That Super Bowl, when he played on that broken ankle, that was one of the gutsiest performances I've ever, because he single-handedly kept them in that game. When McLeod was stinking it up, T.O. was keeping that Eagles team in the game. Yeah, barfing on the field. And I think for him to kind of build himself and make himself into this great wide receiver is respectable. I just, when I say I hate him, what I'm saying is I hate him as a teammate. Obviously not personal against the guy. I just think he was a horrible teammate. He ruined locker rooms. But as a player, you cannot take away what he did. 3rd best receiver I've ever seen.
Yeah. NF, where'd you have him? What do you think?
I had him at number 3, third best receiver I've ever seen. I don't think he was a horrible teammate. I don't buy into all this. T.O. was a cancer talk. I think he was a great player, great teammate. I mean, I remember him sticking up for Tony Romo after that playoff loss. Just a great receiver. He overcame a lot. You know, he came out of a small school, was a third-round pick. Had an issue with drops, but, I mean, he overcame that too with his play on the field, to be honest. There's a reason why quarterbacks kept throwing him the ball. He got open. He made some tough contested catches too. I have him at number 3.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he cried over people criticizing his quarterback. The Rada, what do you have to say about T.O.?
Wait, and if you had him at 3, why? Where'd you have him?
3.
Both of you guys had him at 3? That's crazy, man. Wait a minute. So
Where'd you have him?
I had him at 7, right?
Whoa.
I mean, yeah, I had him at 7.
This guy was the epitome of flash. This guy, he put the ball on the star. He did
He had the vibes.
pom poms. He was flash. You know,
Yeah.
Sharpie.
I agree. You're
Capsule.
100% right. But he ran funny, and for that reason,
and he did push-ups or sit-ups in his
ran
parking
weird.
lot. Yeah.
No, I just think like his on the field performance. Forget about the numbers. Just the way that he ran routes was not that incredible, or the way he got up. I don't know. There's just something about him that was off. And I judge everything based on how entertaining somebody is on the field. Of course, off the field too, and all the antics, the popcorn. It's great. But you gotta be nice on the court. That's why I think the best basketball player is Kyrie Irving, because he's nice.
What are you talking?
He's great. I'm a big fan of Kyrie too.
Next.
saying,
Let's keep moving,
I
guys.
choose on how nice the guy is. His nice ranking is low.
Yeah.
So he got on the list because of his accomplishments, his antics, but he's not that nice. You know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's why Jerry Rice is number 3. He's not that nice.
Yeah. Well, I'll drop the stats on you here. I had T.O. third on my list as well. He's 8th all-time in receptions, 3rd all-time in receiving yards with 50.9K. 15 years, was dominant, very entertaining, a showman, and he was the best in the league for a time. And there's really no...
Touchdowns too.
I'm not sure. I didn't really count touchdowns as something that was relevant for me. You know, I tried to look up the stat of yards after catch, and I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. So I would have also had that play a role, but I couldn't find it where all the receivers had their yak stats. So
I'm sure he was number 1 or number 2 after Jerry Rice.
it's possible. It's possible. All right, our number 2 guy here is Larry Fitzgerald. He was on all of our lists as well. We'll go in reverse order here. The Rada, where did you have him on your list? And what do you think of Larry Fitzgerald?
By the way, I just looked up yards after catch. Terrell Owens is number 3.
Wow. Well, send me that page because I couldn't find it anywhere.
I just chat GPT'd it. Steve Smith is number 2. Jerry Rice is number 1. But let's not talk about Jerry Rice.
Wow.
Okay, so
Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, I had him at number 4. I absolutely love Fitzgerald. Did you guys know he was a ball boy for the Minnesota Vikings before he became an NFL player?
Yeah.
And his favorite wide receiver is Cris Carter, and he modeled his whole career after Cris Carter. And what was Cris Carter most famous for? His hands. The guy catches everything, and Fitzgerald is exactly like that. The man has glue on his hands, and he's just so reliable. And I have a personal connection to Fitzgerald. I love the guy, and his numbers are insane.
You have a personal connection to him? How? You were also a ball boy for the Vikings?
No, he was a ball boy for Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
Nice.
I mean, come on. We have him at number 2, so you guys all agree with me. This guy's incredible.
Well,
he's so good. Just throw him the ball. He's going to catch it.
Well, let's see. Yeah, NF, where did you have him on your list? What do you think about him?
Yeah, I'm kind of. I mean, now that we're coming to the end of the list, speaking of Cris Carter, I'm surprised nobody had him. He didn't crack the top 10.
He's honorable mention for me.
That's crazy. Issac Bruce. Anyway, I had Fitzgerald at number 4. Longevity. I prioritize longevity, as I said again. He was great, man, and he came up in the playoffs and Super Bowls. But here's the one interesting stat that I found on him that I thought was incredible. I think he has the greatest hands in NFL history. Did you know that he had almost double the amount of tackles as he had drops?
Yeah, what a stat. That is an incredible
Wow.
stat. That might be the most impressive stat in NFL history.
He had almost double the amount of tackles as he had drops.
Incredible. And it's also an indictment on the quarterbacks he played for, that he was tackling these guys after they intercepted the ball.
But he had good quarterback play towards the middle half of his career with Kurt Warner and a little bit of Carson Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you saw what that did for him too, right? Like they went to Super Bowl.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So OY, where did you have him on yours?
So I'm at number 5. I think my eyes kind of popped out when you said he was at number 2, but then I remembered that I messed up that list by putting Dennis Houston at number 1. But no, Fitzgerald was. I agree with you guys, man. Like, he's like the Tim Duncan of wide receiver.
Yeah.
Very quiet, gets the job done, just elite for a long time. The only thing he's missing, unfortunately, is the championships. But Super Bowls are different, and the fact that he went there and he performed at that high level speaks volumes. Like he carried that team, like that run that they had. Yeah, I agree with you guys. Maybe the best hands of all time, and maybe the best spectacular catch guy, like just making these unbelievable catches. Fitzgerald, Megatron, I dare say Dez Bryant, just as far as like those catches go. As far as those catches
Odell
go.
Beckham.
Odell's up there.
Yeah.
Odell is up there.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Brandon Lloyd.
Oh, he had some good ones too.
Brandon Lloyd is nice.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, man, he tried to single. Huh?
Wally's gonna rethink his list.
You're gonna add Steve
Largent. I swear
Largent.
to God, Brandon Lloyd almost made it, but I was like, it's insane if I add this guy.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, like you mentioned, he almost single-handedly carried them into a Super Bowl towards the end of his career. He single-handedly won that game against the Packers in the end. He willed them to the win. Like you guys mentioned, I think he's the best pure receiver I've seen in terms of picture-perfect mechanics. Like you mentioned, you called him the Tim Duncan. How to catch the ball at its highest point and secure it. And he had the stats too: 1.4K reception second all-time and 17.4K receiving yards second all-time in 17 years. If there was no Jerry Rice, Larry Fitzgerald would be the greatest receiver of all time in many people's eyes. But he's not, because at number 1, we have Randy Moss. Randy, the dandy boy Moss. He was, again, on all of our lists. We're going to go ahead and start with the Vikings fan here as we wind down. We have like 5 minutes left. Roddy, go ahead and talk about your boy.
He had a action named after his greatness. You can't say that about Jay Rice. You got mossed. You didn't get riced. You got mossed. The man is unbelievable. He's one of those Megatron guys where I don't care about his stats. His stats are probably great, but I don't care. He's just so much better than everyone. Just throw him the ball. He's literally told people, just throw it up there. Don't worry about it. I got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll move on.
Absolutely. Yeah. NF.
He's the GOAT.
Yeah. No Jerry Rice. This guy's the greatest wide receiver of all time. But it says something about Rice that Moss put up those stats and played 2 horrible years with the Raiders. No, and played 2 horrible years with the Raiders. Let's say like those 2 years were continued, or with Tom Brady, he still wouldn't have caught Rice. So I had him at number 2 on my list.
Yeah, I agree with Naya. Second greatest receiver of all time after Rice. And so I'll say 2 things real quick on Moss. The only thing I have to say is 3 catches, 163 yards, 3 touchdowns, 9 knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Put the fear of God, man. He put the fear of God.
Gives me nightmares.
Yeah.
Gives me nightmares. What is it, like 25 years later? I still
Was it Thanksgiving?
Trauma about that. Yeah.
Oh my god.
And the other thing about Moss, I think that second run that he had with the Patriots is what saved his career in terms of being like an all-time.
Took 2 years off. Took 2 years off, essentially.
That's what made him the second greatest of all time.
Yeah.
In my opinion, was that second one. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, stats here. You know, his stats. He's 15th all time in receptions. Not that great. 4th all time in receiving yards. Played for 15 years. And I had him at number 4 on my list because while he was amazing in his prime and was the best receiver in the league for a long time, he took not only several years off, many plays off. He was known to take many plays off. That was his MO, taking plays off. So he did not push himself to be the greatest receiver of all time. To me, he didn't deserve it. But on this list, he did get it. Fellas, we're at 2 minutes left on the call. You know, I know you guys have a lot of honorable mentions. You can put them in the comments and stuff like that. I just want to wrap up this podcast. We were a little more efficient, thankfully, on this one. We're going to get it in under an hour. So I want to thank you guys so much for jumping on this, the top 10 wide receivers of all time. We are going to continue this list, going to tight ends next. All right, we're going to continue wrapping up the offense. Or I don't know if there's some groaning. What you want to do, like defensive ends or the linebackers?
Let's do tight ends. Let's do tight ends next.
Tight ends. Round out the offense. But I want to thank you guys so much for jumping on here. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you're on YouTube, go ahead, subscribe. It really means a lot. Like I said, we have a lot of views, but not a lot of subscribers. It means a lot to us. So listening on a podcast platform, follow on Spotify, follow on Apple Podcasts. Rate us. Give us a 5-star rating. Give us a comment. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We post reels on Instagram pretty consistently, and we repost them on Twitter as well. So, as OY shows you, Michael Irvin on that list. OY, NF, and the Rider. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic day, football fans.